Hi everyone. So my name is Peace and I am from the Mia Black ERG and we're talking about maternal health. Today I'm here with Rumbi and she's going to speak to us about the maternity health system in the UK. Yeah.
Yes, my name is Dr. Rumbi Mutenga. I'm a GP registrar. So I've been a doctor. Is this my fourth year as a doctor? Oh my God, time flies. I've been a doctor for 3 years and this is my fourth year, but it's my first year as a GP trainee. So in 3 years' time, I will be a GP. Prior to being a doctor, I was a midwife, which is something which has hopefully helped inform my choices, the way I manage patients, and why I'm having this discussion with you guys today.
Yeah, beautiful. Just to start off then, what would you say are some of like the cultural and societal factors that like contribute to the differences in maternal health among Black women in the UK?
Absolutely. I guess the first thing is to consider that Black women within the UK are not a monolith. We
Mhm.
have Black women of Caribbean heritage, and even if we just look at the Caribbean, a woman from the Dominican Republic might have a completely, or Cuba, for example, might have a completely different cultural background to a woman from Barbados. So
Yeah.
even thinking about that group, they're not homogenous, let's say. And now we even go to mention Black women that are of African heritage. The culture in Angola, in Zimbabwe, in Mozambique, in Nigeria, Ghana varies widely. So
Mhm.
that's one of the downside is just by nature of the fact that we make up a small part of the population, we have to be grouped as a whole.
Yeah.
And even as Black women, it's not just grouped as Black women, we're BAME, Black and
Yeah.
other minority ethnic groups, which is even a wider net that's been cast.
Yeah.
So, yes, I appreciate that we don't make up a huge proportion of the UK population, but some of the challenges that we face are because we are grouped. And
Yeah.
by being grouped, where it's almost like a let's try and be equal for everyone instead of equitable to what each individual group needs, and that's challenging, that's difficult to
Yeah.
achieve
No.
within the context of the service that we have,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
No, 100%, 100%. And how do you think like these factors are being addressed within the healthcare system?
I think reports like the Embrace report are fantastic. The downside is the year we get the report, it's not like it's giving us results from that previous year, it's a couple of years
Yeah.
back. um but the Embrace report is fantastic. I mean, one of the tertiary or third sector organizations, charities, are doing a great way in advancing, advocating, and highlighting the issues that we're facing.
Yeah.
Examples include an organization called Five Times More. So they were formed when it came out that Black women were 5 times more likely to die in childbirth or the postpartum period. Now it's now 4-ish times more likely to die. So there's been a difference, but the downside, like I said, is this research is we get the results, but it's talking about a couple of years behind.
Yeah.
So charities are doing a great deal to move things forward. Tommy's is also another really good one. They have a collaboration with 5 times more, which is
Oh,
a specialist service for any woman in the UK or birthing person in the UK who's Black or of mixed heritage. They
mhm.
can access their specialist midwives if they're having issues within their pregnancy or feel maybe they need help with advocating for themselves.
Oh, that's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think trusts are also starting to make a step, one of the first things is recognizing that there is an issue there. And once it's been recognized, okay, what can the system do? What can the health service do? What can the government do to help make a change on things? So I think slowly, slowly that's starting to happen.
Yeah, and could you touch a bit more on advocacy and like the benefits of it, how to do it?
Mm. Being pregnant is in a vulnerable position, there's a lot of emotional things happening. It's a new journey, and depending on the social support you have, might make it difficult to express your wishes or background. All these things impact how someone feels to be able to express their wishes, to maybe challenge things that are being presented to them that they don't necessarily feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
And advocacy then comes in, and for example, community people, let's say with for me, for example, as a doctor who was a midwife, if I find myself in a situation where maybe I'm receiving maternity services and things are not quite progressing how I would like, I'm much more, it's easier for me to advocate for myself because I can say, well, actually,
Yeah.
and this study said this or whatever.
Yeah.
Other elements are who you have around you. So the support system, having relatives maybe that are in the medical field, the midwifery field, the nursing field that can come with you to appointments and provide a different advocacy. That's again something to consider, but not everyone has that benefit. So it's then what other things are available there to help. And ultimately, I think being able to advocate for ourselves or have people there able to help us advocate for ourselves ultimately results in a better pregnancy and birthing journey. If you feel you've been empowered, you feel, okay, like labor and delivery doesn't always go how people intend it to.
Yeah.
You know, the baby has their own ideas about how they're going to come out.
Yeah.
Every step of the way, the birthing person feels like, actually, I was listened to. My concerns were heard, my wishes were respected. Whatever that outcome is, overall, it tends to be a better journey.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear that 100%. And what are like what's the current state of advocacy in the NHS?
In terms of advocacy, when I think of advocacy, I think of being heard, and I think of how easy it is to be heard within the context of where you're being looked after.
Yeah.
So what's available at the moment, if you feel you're not being listened to for various reasons, I guess one thing to consider is seeking a second opinion. To feel comfortable enough to ask for a second opinion, sometimes you might need help to advocate for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the great places that are filling those gaps, and it shouldn't be that way, but the great places that are filling those gaps are charities and third sector organizations. So your 5 times more, your Tommies, and also doulas. Doulas are really, really good at being able to advocate for the birthing people that they look after. So I would say that's kind of what's readily available at the moment. But it's not always that straightforward. If, again, as midwives, we are, and I do say as midwives, even though I'm not a practicing midwife at the moment, midwife means with women. So part of our job is to be with women and to support women and to advocate for them, particularly in the room that they're in their most vulnerable moments, actually. The downside with the system is sometimes we don't get to build a relationship or a rapport. And so maybe where someone might have seen the same midwife throughout their pregnancy process and then has that midwife to deliver, which again is quite difficult because how do you know when you're going to go into labor and have a baby? Then that midwife is more equipped to advocate for them because they've met the person 6-7 times already. So they have a better idea of who they are, their wishes, their understanding of things and their misunderstandings of things, and that hopefully would have all been cleared up prior to getting into labor. So continuity of care, I think, is something that could be helpful in advocating, but there's a huge shortage in terms of midwives, and sometimes it's not always practical or possible to deliver that type of service within the staffing constraints that we have.
How can like healthcare providers better support and advocate for the needs of pregnant Black women in terms of like culturally competent care?
Again, because every single culture within the Black community differs,
Yeah.
sometimes I struggle to give one answer or two answers because there isn't. What's culturally competent for me as a British Zimbabwean woman might not be the same cultural competency as a British Jamaican woman. Let me even be more specific.
Yeah.
So one of the things which is helpful is knowing the community that you work in. Sometimes in the UK, depending if you live in urban areas, you might find actually there's a huge Bengali population here. So then you can build more cultural competence because you get to know a little bit about the Bengali culture, the Bengali community, there I think it's much easier to be culturally competent and to build those competencies. If, however, so for myself, I live in quite a rural area,
Mhm.
and as a midwife, I worked at the hospital that you delivered in.
Ugh,
In that instance, you may only see one non-white woman a week, a month, a year,
yeah,
whatever. And so, how do you then become culturally competent
yeah,
if it's not a huge segment of the community? I
yeah.
think what's important in that instance is to always take a step back,
Mm,
to be open to think, okay, is there something that I'm missing here because of my own internal bias?
mm,
Is there something that's happening because of cultural context? And
mm,
what questions do I need to ask? How do I need to educate myself to make sure that this birthing person gets the best possible care that they can in a culturally aware way, really, in a culturally sensitive way.
okay, that's quite interesting. I didn't think about it like that. I didn't like take into account the fact that each region is different. And like, yeah, as you said, Northern Ireland is like it's less than 1% of Black population. Like the reality is, a lot of these healthcare providers are not going to come across, especially outside of the main city.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like that's really interesting. Um, yeah, I think you've touched a lot on like the different like resources and the different like systems and stuff. What like advice would you give a Black woman that's like prior to getting pregnant, during her
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy journey?
One of the best predictors of good pregnancy and birth outcomes is planned pregnancy, pre-pregnancy care.
Okay.
So, what in terms of prior to getting pregnant, I would say optimize your health,
Yeah.
optimize your well-being. If it's a case of any pre-existing medical conditions, make sure those are well managed.
Okay.
If you're on any pre-existing medications, then again, speak to your GP to say, I'm looking to get pregnant. I'm taking this medication, this medication, this medication.
Mm.
Are they okay in pregnancy?
Yeah.
If they're not, let's make that switch now
Okay.
and make sure everything is evened out before we get there.
Yeah.
If it's a case of weight management, if your BMI is in the overweight or obese region, try and drop it if you can. Healthy diet, all these things, because as with all the pre-existing conditions and the modifiable things, so that's weight, smoking, alcohol,
Hmm.
if we continue these things into pregnancy, that comes with risk factors.
Yeah.
So try and minimize whatever you can to
Yeah.
reduce your risk factors.
Yeah.
That's where that pre-pregnancy planning really comes in. And then
Mhm.
if there's any vitamins, things like folic acid, vitamin D, to start taking them. Just start taking them. And I would say alcohol in the sense that if you're planning pregnancies, there's different literature which says how much alcohol is safe. I feel that it's difficult to quantify. And so if you're planning pregnancy, I would err more on the side of caution, which would be to not drink alcohol. And again, like I said, smoking, if you can cut down, do it. If you can stop, even better.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for speaking with us. Thank you so much for taking the time out, and it's been great.
You are very welcome.